Art is better when it's not collaborative. Art is better when it's not collaborative. This is a bit of a clickbait title because of course collaboration is needed to create large products at a mass scale. A song needs producers, writers, engineers, in the same way a film needs a director, gaffer, lighting crew, in the same way a video game needs artists, designers, and animators. This is all true, and has for the most part remained true since the introduction of these forms of entertainment. And while yes, one person can do all of these things, it is rare that it happens. So then, the video could end right here. Turns out, art is collaborative. Hell, even Michelangelo had artists working under him when working on large-scale projects such as the Sistine Chapel. So, while it's true it takes many to come together to make great things, no one is concerned with the other artist that painted the Sistine Chapel. We don't say Michelangelo and friends painted it together, and it's seen as a work of his rather than a work of many. The reason for this is because it was his vision that many came together to bring to life. The idea isn't new. The idea of the auteur, the visionary who leads a project so that the voices of the many can come together to fulfill the voice of a singular person. This is how we get great art. When people describe a work as having vision, they're rarely talking about technical ability. They're talking about cohesion. They mean that every decision, no matter how small, feels like it belongs to the same conversation. The music sounds like it belongs to the world. The dialogue reflects the same themes as the cinematography. The gameplay reinforces the story. Nothing feels accidental because everything is being filtered through the same mind. That's what an auteur really is. Not someone who works alone. Someone whose perspective survives the process. Because the natural state of collaboration is compromise. And compromise is wonderful for almost everything except self-expression. The most memorable works of art don't feel like they were designed by a committee. They feel like you've been invited into someone else's head. That's why you can recognize certain artists almost immediately. You can watch 30 seconds of a film and know it belongs to someone like Quentin Tarantino. You can boot up a game and know it came from Hideo Kojima. You can hear a few bars of music and know exactly who produced it. Video games present an interesting contradiction. They're perhaps the most collaborative art form we've ever created. A blockbuster film might involve a few hundred people. A modern AAA game can involve thousands. Artists, programmers, writers, level designers, gameplay designers, animators, composers, technical artists, producers, QA testers, localization teams. The list is almost endless. By every metric, games should be the least personal medium. And yet, some of the most beloved games ever made feel startlingly intimate. Not because they were made by fewer people, but because you can still feel one person's hand guiding every decision. In fact, some of the most influential games ever made are full of ideas that should have been rejected. Metal Gear Solid spends minutes explaining nuclear deterrence and genetics before asking you to fight a psychic who reads your memory card. Death Stranding asks players to spend dozens of hours delivering packages across a desolate landscape, in a game released at a time when nearly every open-world title was obsessed with constant stimulation. Hideo Kojima is probably the most notable gaming auteur and has been for decades. Now, whether you like his games or not, nobody has ever confused a Kojima game for someone else's. His games are obsessed with the same motifs over and over again. War, information control, aging, loneliness, human connection, genetics, politics, cinema, and the relationship between player and creator. Even his dialogue has an unmistakable rhythm. Characters speak in long philosophical tangents before suddenly shifting into complete absurdity. A deadly sniper battle is followed by a cardboard box joke. A deeply emotional monologue is interrupted by a man named Die Hardman. If you asked a committee to write Metal Gear Solid, most of those ideas wouldn't survive. Someone would argue the cutscenes are too long. Someone would say the exposition needs trimming. Someone would ask whether the audience will understand. They're all reasonable suggestions. And together, they would remove everything that makes a Kojima game feel like a Kojima game.
Go away! I'm not done yet!
Stop!
No!
Stop right there!
No!
Get back here!
The same is true of Fumito Ueda, though his philosophy couldn't be more different. Where Kojima fills every silence with ideas, Ueda builds entire worlds around absence. There's almost no tutorials, very little dialogue, and stories are communicated through architecture, animation, and silence instead of exposition. Shadow of the Colossus doesn't tell you whether what you're doing is heroic. It trusts you to sit with discomfort. Ico asks you to care for another character, not through dialogue, but through the simple act of holding her hand. The Last Guardian spends hours teaching you to understand an animal without ever fully controlling it. These aren't simply gameplay mechanics. They're expressions of how Ueda believes emotion should be communicated. His games aren't trying to entertain you every second. They're asking you to exist inside a particular feeling. That kind of restraint is incredibly difficult to protect on a project involving hundreds of developers. Silence is expensive. Empty space is expensive. Trusting the player is expensive. Every instinct in large-scale production pushes towards adding more dialogue, more objectives, more systems, more tutorials. Ueda's games resist all that because someone at the center refused to let that become louder. Then you have someone like Lucas Pope, who demonstrates the same principles from the opposite direction. Working largely alone, Pope creates games that sound almost impossible to pitch. A game about checking passports. A game about determining insurance claims aboard an abandoned 19th century merchant ship. These ideas shouldn't work, and yet Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn feel unlike anything else in the medium. Not because they're technically revolutionary, but because every mechanic exists to support one central idea. Checking passports isn't busy work. It's a meditation on bureaucracy, morality, and survival. Solving deaths aboard the Obra Dinn isn't just detective work. It's about observation, deduction, and the satisfaction of truly understanding a place through careful attention. Nothing feels included because games are supposed to have this. Everything exists because Lucas Pope wanted you to experience one very specific way of thinking. BioShock wasn't memorable because it had the best shooting mechanics of its generation. People remember BioShock because every system served the same philosophical argument. The city, the audio logs, the plasmids, the Art Deco architecture, the genetic modification, even the famous phrase, "would you kindly?" None of these are isolated ideas. They're all orbiting the same questions about free will, objectivism, and player agency. You don't finish BioShock remembering individual mechanics. You remember the worldview created by Ken Levine. Shigeru Miyamoto's playful curiosity is embedded into Nintendo's design philosophy. Yoko Taro constantly uses game mechanics to question violence, identity, and the player's own complicity. Hidetaka Miyazaki builds worlds where mystery isn't the missing feature, but the point itself, asking players to assemble a history through fragments instead of exposition. The role of the auteur isn't to replace collaboration, it's to give collaboration a destination. Without that destination, teams don't necessarily create something bad. More often, they create something safe. A game designed to satisfy everyone instead of saying something to anyone. The irony is that the larger a game becomes, the more essential that singular voice becomes. Not because one person has all the best ideas, but because someone has to protect the strange ones.